Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stop me if you've heard this before. Governmental misconduct, a deadly pandemic, and a divided America. If the last year felt like we've all been living in a Stephen King novel, who would blame you? Published 4 decades ago, The Stand remains one of Stephen King's most influential books. COVID-19 has given a new resonance to the novel that now reads as downright prophetic. To understand The Stand, we called on University of Vermont English professor Tony Magistrale. Along with helping unpack this 1,200-page novel, we asked Magistrale what it's like to teach about a fictional virus from the comfort of a computer screen when there's a real pandemic raging right outside the door. Across the fence, Keith Silva started the conversation asking Magistrale when he first read the novel.
I think I first read The Stand roughly about the time that it came out. I thought it was really fascinating, and I still think it's fascinating. I still think it's one of the great texts of Stephen King's world.
Give us a short synopsis of The Stand.
The US government is fooling around in territory that it ought not to be fooling around in. A laboratory in California produces a super flu, a super virus that is allowed to escape. And once that escapes, it becomes like a funnel. It moves in all directions outward, and it infects 99% of the world's population, killing them within a week. So that there's a period from about the end of June to about mid-July where the only people who are left are the characters in The Stand, a handful, if you will, of population in America. And then the funnel reverses itself. Everyone moves, of the people who are left, moves via dream telepathy west towards Las Vegas or Boulder, Colorado, which is where the standoff occurs. That's the stand between these two communities. In Vegas, which is representative of the Dark Lord, and Boulder, Colorado, which has a kind of hippie, loosey-goosey feel to it.
What's the appeal of this story?
It depends on who you ask, I think.
Okay.
For me, the appeal is watching the way King weaves and dodges around Americana. He's got several moments when, for example, one of the characters, whose name is Trash Can Man, enters into Las Vegas and discovers the world of Vegas. And there's another character called the Kid, who also is representative of Elvis Presley and a lot of other American males from the 50s. And I think that King captures really well this whole sense of what it's like to be in America, but with everything dead. So you're looking at the artifacts of America, and he's got an amazing level of skill at working with those artifacts.
You mentioned 2 of the bad guys, if you will. How about the good guys?
Yeah, well, of course, it's a battle. It's a war. The great influence on King when he was writing The Stand was Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. So you've got the same sort of mythology that's at work here. Only, of course, King is working with real artifacts where Tolkien's invented this mythology of his own. But King's the good versus evil is very much in play in The Stand. And in fact, I think, like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, it really is a religious text. It's about good doing battle against evil.
How does The stand up 40 years removed from the social, political, and cultural tenor of late 70s or the 1970s?
Well, I mean, the most obvious connection seems to be with the pandemic that we're currently experiencing.
Sure.
COVID-19. The effects of COVID have created a universe of anxiety and restlessness.
Mm.
And I think that this is also what many of the characters experience in The Stand when they realize that there's only a handful of human beings left.
What is it that we can learn about The Stand amidst the COVID-19 pandemic?
There's a character in The Stand. His name is Glen Bateman. He's really, in many ways, King's spokesman. At least let's call him his philosopher slash socio-critic perspective.
Okay.
And Glen Bateman says at one point when he's talking to his dog Kojak that control is what separates the higher species from the lower species. If you exercise self-control and self-discipline over yourself, you'll be fine. If you don't, you fall into the position of engaging dark elements of the psyche in yourself, and as a culture, as a society, as a subgroup, that also works that way too.
Glen Bateman wouldn't have gone home to see grandma, is what I hear you telling me.
In fact, Glen Bateman would have seen grandma, but he would have seen grandma the same way I'm seeing you right now.
The Stand was in development for TV and film almost immediately after it was published in '78. Talk about the first adaptation in 1994. It was broadcast as an 8-hour miniseries. I know you've written about this. Talk about that miniseries, that first miniseries.
Well, when it was completed, when the miniseries was completed, King brought it to UVM and previewed it here. It didn't have all of the special effects that were later going to be imposed on the miniseries. But he brought it to UVM, and our students actually got to see it before it was released on ABC.
Cool.
And it was very cool, but even then, one could tell there were going to be some problems. And I think the big problem turned out to be the special effects. For example, there is at one point where a dirty nuclear bomb goes off in Las Vegas. The mushroom and the light occurs. You see it from the desert where one of the characters has broken his leg and he's had to stay there. You see it from the desert, and it's over Stu's shoulder, and it lasts about maybe 30 seconds, and then it's gone. And you could imagine what a nuclear bomb would do in terms of it didn't work real well.
Did you feel that the '94 version captured the book?
I think it captured some of the devastation of the book, the pessimism of the book. But in the end, I think it was more focused on the survivors and their optimism and their hope. And that is an element in the novel. There is a spirit of survivalism and that good wins out over evil. But the book is far more pessimistic, I think.
How do students react when you teach this book? What are they interested in when you teach it?
Keith, that's a really good question, and I've never taught it before, but I'm going to do it this semester. I think you have to, when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're teaching a course on the novels of Stephen King, how do you avoid teaching The Stand?
Right.
You have to see. So you'd have to ask me that question in April.
Okay. Well, this leads me to my next question, which is: you've been teaching at UVM. You taught during the shutdown at UVM during the COVID pandemic. What's it been like?
I don't like it. I really don't like teaching on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing hybrid courses. This is a man in his 60s with intermittent asthma, and I'm still risking going in front of a classroom of young potential spreaders and doing this because I'm so frustrated with what happens when you do an online course. I don't have students who are like you, who are hanging on my words. And instead, they close their doors, even when I tell them, don't close your doors, keep the video on. They close their doors and they go off and do other things, or certainly that it's not conducive for generating conversation. And that's a big part of the way that I teach. You have to talk to me, and it's a lot harder when you're doing it remotely than when you've got them in front of you and you're saying, if it's quiet, you say, look, I'm taking a risk here to be with you in front of you here. Talk to me or I'm walking out of here and you're going to deal with the cameras.
One more question, which is, King's blessing and curse is kind of how prolific he's been. And he continues to publish these chart-topping books 50 years on in a career. So when all's said and done, where does The Stand stand?
Well, it's been an amazing run that he's had, isn't it? I mean, just phenomenal when you think about the amount of work that he's churned out. Some of it extraordinary, like The Shawshank Redemption and like The Stand and The Shining. Amazing texts. A lot of it, dismissible. A lot of it that will fall into the ash heaps of popular culture. After it's all said and done, the horror in Stephen King's world doesn't preclude the possibility for transcendence. And a lot of people don't like him for that. A lot of people want him to write horror fiction that ends horribly. But I think he's got a vision that he's working with. Call it a kind of sentimentalism that's at work. But people do survive in his world. Often they're kids, and often they're people who have to go through tremendous struggle, like Larry in The Stand. But it's about change, and it's about positive change.
Tony's latest book is Stephen King and American History, co-written by Michael J. Bluen. The book explores topics discussed on today's show, such as King's nostalgia for the 1950s and how issues of politics of today inform American popular culture. Ask for it at your local library or your favorite bookstore. And that's our show for today. Thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.